October 14, 2003. 2:47 p.m. An 8-year-old girl walked into a bathroom at Westfield Shopping Centre in San Diego. Her name was Emma Martinez. She was wearing a pink Britney Spears t-shirt and white sneakers with tiny flowers on them. Her mother was waiting outside the door, close enough to hear if something went wrong. Close enough, she thought, to keep her safe. Emma never came back out. Not in 5 minutes. Not in 10. Not in 47 minutes. 47 minutes. That's the gap. That's the void. That's where Emma Martinez disappeared without a scream, without a struggle, without a single piece of physical evidence left behind. The broken surveillance camera that would have captured her exit? It had been broken for 3 weeks. No one had reported it. No one had fixed it. Here's what the police found. Nothing. No CCTV footage. No witness statements. No body. No ransom note. No trace of an 8-year-old girl who should have been easy to find in a crowded mall on a Tuesday afternoon. Here's what her mother found. An empty bathroom and a question that would consume the next 15 years of her life. But this isn't a story about what happened in those 47 minutes. This is a story about what happened 15 years later, when an ordinary girl, scrolling through Facebook on an ordinary Thursday morning, saw a birthmark. A distinctive butterfly-shaped birthmark. And recognized it immediately. Because she had drawn that butterfly 1,000 times. She had kissed that birthmark during sleepovers. She had been best friends with the girl who wore it. That girl was Emma Martinez. And she was alive. Before we go any further, if you're watching from your country, drop a comment below and tell me where you're tuning in from. And hit that subscribe button right now, because this case took a turn that nobody, absolutely nobody, saw coming. This is Emma's Echo. Emma Maria Martinez was born on March 7, 1995, into a working-class family in San Diego's Rancho Penasquitos neighborhood. Her father, Miguel, worked construction. Her mother, Sandra, worked retail. They weren't wealthy. They weren't famous. They were ordinary. And Emma was extraordinary precisely because she was so wonderfully, achingly ordinary. She had 2 siblings, an older brother and a younger one. Emma was the middle child. The peacemaker. Teachers remembered her as quiet. Classmates remembered her as kind. Her mother remembered her as the one who held everyone together. She would make sure nobody fought, Sandra Martinez recalled years later, her voice still carrying the weight of memory. Emma made sure everyone was okay. Even when she was just 8 years old, she was already taking care of other people. Emma had a best friend named Jessica Torres. They had been inseparable since kindergarten, the kind of friendship that defines childhood, where the 2 girls were barely distinguishable as separate people. Where Emma went, Jessica followed. Where Jessica was, Emma appeared. They finished each other's sentences. They shared secrets. They had dreams together. Emma wanted to be a veterinarian. She drew constantly, pictures of horses, pictures of animals, pictures of the butterfly-shaped birthmark on her right shoulder blade that she decorated with markers and colors. That birthmark would become significant later. But in October 2003, it was just a mark on a child's skin. Unremarkable. Unmemorable. Unless you loved that child. Unless you saw it every day. Jessica saw it every day. On October 14, 2003, Sandra decided to take the children shopping. Back to school shopping. Emma needed new clothes, new supplies. It was a normal Tuesday afternoon. The mall was busy but not crowded. The kind of afternoon when nothing feels dangerous. When the world feels safe. Emma asked to use the bathroom near the food court. Sandra said yes. She didn't think it was dangerous. Why would she? It was a busy mall. There were security guards. There were people everywhere. The bathroom was just 50 feet away. Emma could go in alone for the first time. She was 8 years old. She was old enough. Sandra checked her watch. 2:47 p.m. Go ahead, Mija, she told her daughter. I'll be right here. Emma walked into the bathroom. She never walked back out. 2:47 p.m. Emma enters the bathroom. Sandra waits outside. She's close enough to hear the other stall doors, close enough to listen for her daughter's voice. Everything is normal. Everything is fine. 3:05 p.m. Emma still hasn't come out. Sandra feels the first twinge of something. Not quite worry. Just notice. Kids take time in bathrooms. Emma is probably dawdling, checking herself in the mirror, washing her hands carefully the way Sandra taught her. Nothing to worry about. Not yet. 3:12 p.m. Now Sandra is worried. She approaches the bathroom attendant. Did you see a small girl in here? Pink shirt? Braided hair. The attendant shakes her head. I didn't see anyone leave. Sandra's stomach drops. 3:18 p.m. She checks the food court. She checks the nearby stores. She walks quickly back to the bathroom and looks under every stall door. Empty. All empty. 3:25 p.m., Sandra finds mall security. Her voice is shaking now. My daughter is missing. She went to the bathroom and never came back. Her name is Emma Martinez. She's 8 years old. The next 2 hours become a blur of fluorescent lights and growing panic. Security checks every store. They page Emma's name over the intercom. They check every bathroom in the mall. They review footage from the cameras. But the one camera that would have captured the bathroom exit, the one camera that would have shown who took Emma or whether she walked out on her own, is dark. It's been broken for 3 weeks. 4 p.m., San Diego Police Department arrives. Officers fan out through the mall. They take statements from Sandra, from other shoppers, from mall employees. They establish a perimeter. They begin the search protocol for a missing child. 4:35 p.m., the Amber Alert is activated. Emma's photograph, smiling, innocent, that butterfly birthmark invisible under her clothing, is broadcast across news stations and radio channels throughout Southern California. 5 p.m., a missing child task force has assembled. Detective Marcus Stone, a veteran officer with 28 years of experience, takes the case personally. He stands in the mall bathroom and stares at the broken camera. He thinks about what he cannot see. He thinks about what the camera would have shown. By 6 p.m., Sandra Martinez knows, with a certainty that transcends logic, that her daughter is gone. Not lost. Gone. And the 47 minutes between 2:47 and 3:34 will consume the next 15 years of her life, replaying over and over, an infinite loop of questions that will never find answers. Not yet, anyway. The machinery of a missing child investigation is devastating in its efficiency. By Wednesday morning, October 15, 2003, just 12 hours after Emma's disappearance, the response had escalated beyond the capacity of the San Diego Police Department's resources. Detective Marcus Stone hadn't slept. He sat in the task force office at 6 a.m., Emma's photograph taped to the wall in front of him. He studied her face like he could decode some hidden message, some signal that would tell him what happened in those missing 47 minutes. Stone was a creature of precision. In his 28 years, he had solved 143 cases. He had an 87% closure rate. But the Emma Martinez case arrived incomplete, missing the first chapter, the context, the evidence that would have made everything clear. By 7 a.m., the Martinez house had become a command center. Volunteers flooded in. Neighbors, friends, church members, strangers who simply saw a missing child and felt compelled to help. They made flyers. They organized search teams. They combed the neighborhood surrounding the mall, looking for Emma in every park, every alley, every place a confused child might have wandered. Jessica Torres, Emma's best friend, appeared on local news with her parents on Wednesday afternoon. She was only 8 years old, but her message was devastatingly simple. Emma is my best friend. Please bring her home. That image, an 8-year-old girl begging for her best friend to come home, became the emotional centerpiece of the investigation. News stations replayed it hourly. The community was mobilized by genuine empathy and profound fear. By Thursday morning, October 17, the search had expanded. Police divers entered the Penasquitos Creek. Search dogs combed neighborhoods. Ground teams checked storm drains, abandoned buildings, any space where a child could be hidden or trapped. 3 primary theories dominated investigator thinking. Theory 1. A stranger with organized child abduction experience took Emma deliberately. This wasn't opportunistic. This was planned. Theory 2. Emma had wandered out of the mall and become lost or disoriented in unfamiliar territory, possibly suffering from confusion or shock. Theory 3. Someone known to the family was involved, a family member with access and motive. Over 147 tips flooded in within 72 hours. Every single one was investigated. Every single one led nowhere. By Saturday, October 18th, the media narrative had shifted. Hope was beginning to curdle into desperation. The local news stopped reporting Emma missing and started reporting, "Search continues for Emma Martinez." The tone changed. The tense shifted. Sandra Martinez appeared on television holding her daughter's photograph. She was hollow-eyed, barely holding composure. "Emma is our daughter. She's our family. If anyone knows anything, please come forward. Please bring her home." She had to pause. Had to stop. Because the camera was capturing her breaking in real time. The search continued. But by Saturday evening, the first whispers of a darker possibility began circulating, not in the official investigation, but in the whispered conversations of a scared community. What if Emma never comes home? Fear has a smell. It has a texture. In San Diego in October 2003, fear became the dominant atmosphere, seeping into coffee shops, playgrounds, church parking lots, and family dinner tables. Parents who had been casual about allowing children independence suddenly enforced lockdown protocols. Kids who had walked home from school now had to be picked up. Playdates required explicit parental supervision. The Westfield Shopping Centre, a place of innocent childhood wonderment, became a place of darkness in the collective imagination. And then the theories started. One prevailing conspiracy: a shopping mall employee recently hired, now recently quit, had something to do with it. Police investigated. They found nothing concrete. But the theory persisted, spreading through neighborhood watch groups and early 2000s internet bulletin boards. Another theory: a construction worker with access to the mall's service corridors. This one also went nowhere, but it lived on in community gossip. The Martinez family itself came under scrutiny, the kind of cruel examination that communities sometimes inflict on the grieving. Questions emerged. Why was Emma allowed to go to the bathroom alone at her age? Did the family have financial problems? Was there a custody dispute? Was there something we don't know? None of these questions had bearing on the truth. But they circled nonetheless, a toxic miasma of speculation that traumatized the family further. Jessica Torres, Emma's best friend, struggled the most. She was 8 years old. She had been waiting while shopping. The loss of her closest friend, combined with community gossip and her own child's guilt, the irrational belief that she should have been with Emma, led to years of behavioral problems and anxiety. Teachers at their school reported that Jessica withdrew from other friendships. She stopped raising her hand in class. She began having panic attacks, short, sharp bursts of fear with no clear trigger. In her child's mind, Emma had disappeared because Jessica wasn't there. If she had been there, she could have stopped it. That's how children process trauma. Irrationally. Absolutely. Permanently. By 2004, the broader community had transformed Emma Martinez from a missing child into a symbol. A symbol of every parent's darkest nightmare. A symbol of the fragility of childhood innocence. A symbol of the fact that safety is an illusion, that horrible things can happen in broad daylight, in crowded places, to ordinary families. Emma's disappearance had cracked the community's sense of security, and nothing would ever fully repair it. Marcus Stone was a detective from an older era, the kind of cop who believed in the sanctity of closed cases and the obligation to the dead and missing. He didn't view his job as transactional. He didn't view cases as files. He viewed them as debts owed to people who couldn't speak for themselves. Emma Martinez became his debt. While official police resources were gradually redirected as the case grew cold, Stone continued to work it in his spare time. On weekends. Sometimes off the clock. His case files expanded to fill an entire wall of his home office. Red string connected possible suspects. Timeline reconstructions were redrawn dozens of times. He interviewed the same witnesses multiple times, not because he believed they were lying but because he believed he was missing something crucial. Some detail that would crack everything open. By 2008, 5 years into the investigation, Stone's marriage was strained. His wife reported that he'd spend entire evenings staring at Emma's photograph. He couldn't let it go, she would later say. He felt like he'd failed that child. His colleagues noticed the deterioration, gray hairs arriving faster than time should allow, weight loss, a nervous habit of clicking his pen repeatedly while thinking through problems. In police department reviews, superiors noted that while Stone's dedication was admirable, his investment in closed cases was becoming pathological. In one meeting, a captain told him directly, "Marcus, you need to find closure on this one. You're burning yourself out." Stone's response was quiet: "There's no closure without answers." By 2010, Stone was passed over for promotion. He was told, not unkindly, to move forward. But he couldn't. Every birthday he would note how old Emma would be turning. By 2013 she would have been 18. By 2015, old enough to drive. By 2018, old enough to graduate high school. Each milestone was a private grief that Stone carried alone. In 2016, Stone began working with forensic genealogists, an emerging field that was reshaping cold case investigations. He submitted DNA evidence collected from the mall, skin cells, fibers, to new databases. Results came back inconclusive. By 2018, Stone was 6 months from retirement. He had worked the Emma Martinez case for 15 years. He had never solved it. He had begun to accept that he might retire without ever knowing what happened to that girl. That acceptance, when it came, felt like defeat. Between 2008 and 2017, The Emma Martinez case became what it had always been feared to become: a cold case. Not forgotten, missing children rarely are, but no longer actively hunted by the machinery of law enforcement. Resources were redirected to new disappearances, new emergencies, new tragedies that demanded immediate attention. Detective Stone remained the case's unofficial keeper, but he was one aging detective with limited authority and diminishing institutional support. The Martinez family endured a particular kind of torture: the absence of closure combined with the inability to move forward. You can't grieve completely when you don't know if your loved one is dead or alive. You can't organize your emotions into neat phases of acceptance. You're locked in a permanent state of suspended anxiety. Sandra Martinez became involved with organizations supporting families of missing children. She gave talks at schools about child safety. She networked with other parents whose children had vanished. But privately she struggled with depression that came in waves. Some days she couldn't leave her bed. Some days she couldn't stop thinking about what she had done wrong. On October 14, 2003. If I had gone with her to the bathroom. If I had said no. If I had done anything differently, she told a therapist years later, maybe she'd still be here. Miguel struggled with anger. It poured out in unexpected moments, at traffic, at strangers, at his wife for reasons that had nothing to do with what he was actually angry about. Emma's siblings grappled with a sibling-shaped void. The missing sister became a ghost in the household, present in her absence, alive in everyone's memory and grief. Jessica Torres grew into adulthood carrying the trauma of her friend's disappearance. In interviews years later, she described the strange guilt of surviving and thriving when Emma's life had been suspended in time at age 8. Every milestone, first boyfriend, college graduation, first job, was tinged with awareness that Emma would never have these things. By 2015, the Emma Martinez case had generated over 1,200 tips. None conclusive. By 2017, the case had been inactive for nearly a decade. The files remained open. The case remained unsolved. But the investigation, the active, intentional search for truth, had largely ceased. Emma Martinez was a missing child frozen in time. And everyone involved had begun to accept that she might stay that way forever. Thursday, March 15, 2018. 12:34 p.m. Jessica Torres was scrolling through Facebook during her lunch break. She worked in marketing in Los Angeles now. She was 23 years old. She had built a life far from San Diego, far from the shadow of October 2003. She had friends, a job, a future that Emma would never have. That was the constant baseline of her guilt. She wasn't looking for anything specific. She was just passing time, that mindless scrolling that fills lunch breaks and moments of emptiness. Her Facebook feed suggested new friends. Most were strangers. Most she ignored. Then she saw the profile picture. The woman in the photograph had a distinctive butterfly-shaped birthmark on her right shoulder. Jessica's breath caught. She knew that birthmark. She had drawn pictures of it dozens of times as a child, those intricate butterfly wings rendered in pencil and colored marker. She had kissed that birthmark during sleepovers. It was unmistakable, unforgettable, burned into her memory with the intensity that only childhood friendship can create. The profile belonged to a woman named Rachel Morrison. Age 23. Living in Portland, Oregon. Jessica clicked. Her hands were shaking. The woman in the photographs had Emma's eyes. Older now, 15 years older, but unmistakably the same eyes. The same shape of the face. The same smile. The name Rachel Morrison meant nothing to Jessica. But the birthmark meant everything. Jessica immediately contacted the San Diego Police Department. She called Detective Marcus Stone directly, a relationship that had been formed through years of case updates and community involvement. Stone's response to the tip was cautious. He had heard 1,200 theories before. But Jessica's specificity compelled him to investigate. Within 24 hours, San Diego PD had contacted Facebook. Within 48 hours, they had identified the account holder as Rachel and Morrison, DOB March 7, 1995. The birthday matched Emma's. The birthmark was unmistakable. The account creation date was 2004, shortly after Emma's disappearance. Everything pointed to the same impossible conclusion. Emma Martinez, the girl who had disappeared from the Westfield Shopping Centre on October 14, 2003, apparently existed as a 23-year-old woman living under a different name in Portland, Oregon. Law enforcement began monitoring the account. They subpoenaed Facebook records to determine location data, IP addresses, account recovery information. The narrative had shifted. Suddenly, after 15 years of nothing, there was something. The question was no longer, What happened to Emma Martinez? The question was now, who took her and why? The investigation into Rachel Morrison moved with the precision of law enforcement pursuing a concrete lead. Within days, agents had contacted her adoptive parents, Doug and Catherine Morrison, who lived in Eugene, Oregon. Their story was deeply disturbing. Rachel was their biological daughter, born March 7, 1995. They had raised her in Oregon since her childhood. She had attended local schools. She had friends. She had what appeared to be a normal life. But when detectives examined her early childhood documentation, birth certificates, school enrollments, medical records, they discovered something chilling. The records appeared to have been created around 2004. There was no clear trail of her existence prior to that year. No baby photos from before 2004. No medical records from infancy. No documentation of her early childhood. It was as if Rachel Morrison had been invented in 2004. DNA analysis confirmed what the birthmark had suggested. Rachel Morrison was, genetically, Emma Martinez. Catherine Morrison's account to investigators was that Rachel had been adopted through informal channels, in 2004, shortly after Emma's disappearance. The paperwork had been handled through intermediaries. Catherine and Doug had paid $12,000. They had been told not to ask questions about the child's origins. They had complied, raising Rachel as their own, believing they were providing a loving home to a child in need. What emerged was not a simple kidnapping case but something far more sinister: the organized abduction and sale of a child through an underground adoption trafficking network. Emma Martinez had not been murdered by a stranger acting on impulse. She had not been held captive in a basement. She had been taken systematically, as part of a business operation designed to supply infants and young children to adoptive families who asked no questions. Rachel Morrison herself, now an adult, had no memory of her life as Emma Martinez. She had no recollection of her biological family, of Jessica, of the shopping mall, of her mother's face. Her earliest memories began in Oregon around age 4 or 5, already reconditioned, already integrated into her adoptive identity. The psychological erasure was complete. She had been stolen, transported across state lines, given a new name, and assimilated into a family so completely that the original Emma, the girl who had loved horses and wanted to be a veterinarian, had been, for all practical purposes, eliminated. The question was no longer, what happened to Emma? The question was now, how many other children had been moved through this same network? The investigation into the trafficking network that had taken Emma Martinez expanded rapidly. The FBI took the lead, working with San Diego PD and law enforcement in Oregon. Federal agents began tracing financial records, interviewing witnesses, and building a picture of organized child trafficking. The intermediaries who had arranged Rachel/Emma's adoption became the focus. One name emerged repeatedly in records and witness statements: Robert Charles Hendricks, a man with a history of involvement in informal adoption services. Hendricks had connections to multiple families who had adopted children through similar underground channels between 2003 and 2008. Bank records revealed a chilling pattern: transfers of money ranging from $8,000 to $15,000 per transaction, flowing from adoptive families to shell accounts controlled by Hendricks. Over 5 years, Hendricks had facilitated at least 17 child transfers, generating nearly $180,000 in proceeds. The network extended further. Hendricks worked with a woman named Margaret Chin, a former social worker who had access to vulnerable families and children in state custody. Chin identified targets: children without secure family documentation or legal oversight, and Hendricks arranged the transfers. A third participant, Daniel "Danny" Price, served as a courier and enforcer, moving children across state lines, managing logistics, ensuring that no child could be traced back to origin. The mechanism was terrifyingly simple: identify a child, separate them from their origin, create new documentation, place them with pre-vetted adoptive families, collect payment, move on to the next child. Psychological conditioning, sometimes involving drugs, sometimes simple isolation and emotional manipulation, ensured that children forgot their prior identities. In Emma's case, the investigation revealed she had been handled by all 3 conspirators. Chin had identified her at the mall. Chin had worked in the school district and knew Emma's routine, her habits, her vulnerability. Price had managed the abduction and transportation. Hendricks had placed her with the Morrisons, carefully selecting a family that was financially stable, desperate for a child, and unlikely to ask difficult questions. Phone records placed Price at the Westfield Shopping Centre on October 14, 2003. Security footage, when re-examined with new investigative focus, showed a man matching Price's description in the mall's service corridors at the precise time of Emma's disappearance. Security camera footage from an adjacent corridor captured a man carrying a child matching Emma's description toward the mall's service exit, the one without CCTV coverage. For the first time in 15 years, investigators had physical evidence placing a suspect at the scene. The case that had seemed impossible to solve suddenly became inevitable. Robert Charles Hendricks, Margaret Chin, and Daniel Price were arrested in May 2018, just 2 months after Jessica Torres saw that birthmark on Facebook. The interrogations began immediately. Hendricks and Chin, facing substantial federal charges, cooperated with investigators, providing detailed information about the trafficking network in exchange for reduced sentences. Price initially resisted, but eventually confessed after being confronted with phone records, location data, and security footage placing him at the mall. Hendricks's confession was clinical and chilling. He described Emma's abduction with the emotional detachment of someone discussing a business transaction. We identified her as a suitable candidate. She was young, vulnerable, without complicating family dynamics. We took her from the mall. She was sedated to prevent resistance. She was kept in a temporary holding location for 3 days while we prepared her placement documentation. Then she was transported to Oregon. He said it as if he were describing a product shipment. Margaret Chin, in her statement, revealed that she had been responsible for at least 9 of the 17 children moved through the network. I told myself they were going to good homes, she said. I told myself I was saving them. She was not saving anyone. In 2019, following plea agreements, Hendricks received 24 years in federal prison. Chin received 18 years. Price received 20 years. Additionally, all 3 faced charges of human trafficking, kidnapping, conspiracy to commit fraud, and child endangerment. The sentences reflected the severity of the crime and the number of victims involved. The Martinez family attended the sentencing hearing. Sandra Martinez made a victim impact statement that was captured in courtroom video. For 15 years, I didn't know if my daughter was alive or dead. For 15 years, I imagined the worst. To know she was alive, to know she had been stolen by people who sold her like an object. This provides no comfort. There is no justice that brings back the years we lost. She had to pause. Her voice broke. She could not continue. Emma Martinez, legally recognized now as Emma Michelle Martinez, but still carrying the psychological imprint of Rachel Morrison, chose to maintain contact with her adoptive family while cautiously rebuilding a relationship with her biological family. She was caught between 2 identities, 2 families, 15 years of lost time, and a psychological complexity that no legal verdict could resolve. 5 years after Emma's identification in 2018, the Martinez family remains fractured by the revelation. Emma, now 28 years old, has legally reclaimed her original identity, but she continues to carry the psychological imprint of Rachel Morrison. Her earliest memories are of Oregon, not San Diego. Her deepest emotional attachments are to her adoptive parents, not her biological family. She has built relationships with both families, but the connections are provisional, complicated, forever burdened by what was lost and what cannot be recovered. Her mother Sandra describes these interactions as both healing and painfully inadequate. It's like learning to know a stranger who has your face. We're connected by blood and by history, but we're also separated by everything she experienced that we weren't part of. Jessica Torres, Emma's childhood best friend, was reunited with her at a public event in 2019. The reunion was emotional but complicated. They had been best friends as 8-year-olds, but 15 years of divergent lives had created a chasm neither could fully bridge. Jessica had spent her childhood in California, traumatized by her friend's disappearance. Emma had spent hers in Oregon without memories of that friendship. They could not simply resume where they'd left off. Too much time had passed. Too much had changed. Detective Marcus Stone retired 6 months after the arrests. Colleagues noted that solving the Emma Martinez case, while providing some closure, had not brought him the peace he'd expected. In his retirement interview, Stone reflected, "We found Emma. But finding is not the same as saving. She was alive all those years, but in a very real way the child I was looking for, the Emma who had disappeared in 2003, no longer existed. What we found was Rachel. And that's its own kind of tragedy." The case revealed systemic failures in child protection, identity documentation, and interstate law enforcement coordination. Multiple reviews determined that earlier implementation of comprehensive child identification protocols and interstate information sharing might have identified the trafficking network sooner. The Westfield Shopping Centre continues to operate. Children continue to play in its corridors. Parents continue to bring families there. Emma's disappearance has become a local legend, whispered as a tragedy but ultimately absorbed into the community's historical consciousness. Emma Martinez was missing for 15 years. But in a deeper sense she was never found. What was found was Rachel Morrison, the girl who had replaced her. And Emma, the original Emma, remains somewhere between two identities, caught in the space between two lives. She is home but she is not home. She is alive but part of her remains lost. If you're watching this from around the world, I want to know what you think. Drop a comment below. Tell me your theories. Tell me where you're watching from. And subscribe to this channel, because there are dozens more solved cold cases like this one. Cases where the answers are more complex than we could ever imagine. Cases where justice is delivered, but closure remains impossible. Emma Martinez was found. But her story, the real story, is still being written.